Alright, this is Job chapter 1 in the MacArthur Study Bible and also in the Enduring Word commentary by David Guzik, however you say his last name. And as I go through these notes for this chapter, for the other chapters, I'll probably make it clear whenever I'm using both of the sources. That way I won't be guilty of plagiarism. And I'll give my own commentary or my own thoughts, so I may make it clear whenever I'm giving my own thoughts versus their thoughts. Alright, so helping me, Lord, to be careful with this. Yep, and, give credit where credit's due. Alright, so I'm going to begin as I did with Mark. I read the chapters in sections, so I'm going to do the same thing. Because in the MacArthur Study Bible, it gets split up into various sections, and also the chapters in Enduring Word with the various notes. And it looks like the sections line up. Yeah, it looks like they're the same sections. Yeah, so I'll read each one, and then I'll go through all of the notes and move on to the next one, and hopefully I'll finish this video in one sitting. I mean, there's quite a bit of there's a lot of notes on Enduring Word, so I'll see how far I get and go from there. And I don't know if it'll be a part 1 or if it'll be just one whole video. Alright, I'll just wait and see. Alright, we start with the first 5 verses in this first section. In the MacArthur Bible, it's Job and his family in Uz. Or in the Enduring Word, it's the earthly stage, because it says there's 2 stages for a great drama, earth and heaven. So starting here on earth. Yep. So, and this section identifies the main persons and sets the stage up for the drama to follow. Yeah, as MacArthur says. So let's begin. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. And his 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. Also his possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large household, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. And his sons would go and feast in their houses, each on his appointed day, and would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. So it was, when the days of fasting had run their course, that Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God. It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did regularly. Alright, so we'll start with those verses. We'll start with some Enduring Word notes. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. So this book begins, the book of Job begins by introducing its central character and the man who perhaps wrote the book by recording his own experiences. Even though I remember in the intro where MacArthur made some arguments as to probably why Job did not write the book. Primarily because he's not going to know what's going to happen next. And then another point from Enduring Word, that man was blameless and upright, one who feared the Lord. Yeah, one who feared feared God and shunned evil. The first look at Job shows him to be an exceedingly righteous man, and the author gives an impressive description of a man who's not perfect, but certainly complete in his devotion, respect, and obedience to God. Now, before I continue, there's some sub-points to that points, but I'm going to say what MacArthur has to say real quick. Now, Uz, Job's home city, Yeah, well, Job's home was a walled city with gates, where he held a position of great respect. And the city was in the land of Uz in northern Arabia, adjacent to Midian, where Moses lived for 40 years. And so, of course, the story begins with Job as the central figure. He was a rich man with 7 sons and 3 daughters, in his middle years with a grown family, but still a young father to father 10 more children. He was a good family man, rich and widely known. Yep, and as I just read, he was blameless and upright. So MacArthur says that Job was not perfect or without sin. However, it appears from the language that he had put his trust in God for redemption and fully lived a God-honoring, sincere life of integrity and consistency personally, materially, and parentally. All right. All right, back to endearing word. And Job's connection with God seems to be independent of any other Old Testament character. He definitely seems to have lived before the time of Moses and the people of Israel, perhaps even before the time of Abraham. And some believe that Jobab, mentioned in Genesis 10:29, is Job, one of the descendants of Noah leading up to Abraham. That would put him in, if that's the case, that would put him in the era between Noah and Abraham. And probably it's likely, this is me saying this, but it's probably likely that maybe this story happened maybe after the Tower of Babel. So, it's possible, maybe. Since everyone was unified, and then when the Tower of Babel happened, everybody scattered all over the planet. So, it's possible that that happened. Afterwards, maybe. But maybe right before Abraham. All right. Now, if he was in the era between Noah and Abraham, going back to endearing word, if that was the era of Job, then we can say that Job's deep and true relationship with God was no doubt passed on to him from his ancestors dating back to the time of Noah and his son. So in this respect, he was somewhat like Melchizedek, as in Genesis 14:18 through 24, who simply appeared on the scene as someone who was a worshiper and a follower of the one true God. And you remember Melchizedek was that priest that appeared to Abraham, and he blessed him, after Abraham ended up delivering Lot. All right, and another point from endearing word, and others point to several reasons for dating Job later, perhaps in the generations after Jacob and Esau. And here's some reasons as to maybe why that could be the case. Huz or Uz, I don't know, was Abraham's nephew, the son of his brother, Genesis 22:21. The land of Uz may have been named after him. And then here's another reason, maybe he could be in the generations after Jacob and Esau, maybe. Eliphaz, he was the son of Esau. Yep. And this son of Esau had a son named Teman, and the descendants of Teman were known for their wisdom. And there's going to be a guy named Eliphaz in this story, one of the friends. So I don't know if it is that Eliphaz that descended from Esau, or it could have been just somebody different with the same name. So who knows? And then another reason, maybe, it could have been later after the time of Abraham, is you got this other guy, Bildad. He's called a Shuhite, and Shua was the son of Abraham through Keturah, who was the lady, that was the lady that Abraham would marry, after his wife Sarah died. All right. And here's some more notes on endearing word. And this strong statement of the godliness of Job is important to understanding the rest of the story. So recognizing this righteousness of Job will save us from the mistake, and this is a quote, from this guy called Morgan. It doesn't give the first name. Sometimes there's going to be quotes from various theologians or pastors. It'll just give their last names. So I don't know who all of these people are. Alright, and here's that quote here. Recognizing this righteousness of Job will save us from the mistake of thinking that at any point of those experiences as having their explanation in the man himself, nor for himself did he suffer. His pains were not penalties for wrongdoing. They were not even chastisements for correction. And then here's another quote from a guy, his last name is Lawson. Job was blameless. Now this does not mean that Job was sinless, but blameless. There's a huge difference. Sin is vertical. Blameless is horizontal. As Job lived before the watchful eye of his peers, no one could charge Job with any moral failure. His reputation was impeccable. So he basically lived a lifestyle where you could not really point out any wrongdoing on his part. And then here's another quote from a guy whose last name I guess is Anderson. The instance on Job's uprightness should not be weakened in the interests of a dogma of universal human depravity. Job is not considered to be perfect or sinless. All the speakers of this book, including Job himself, are convinced that men are sinful. Job's first recorded act is to offer sacrifices for sin. That's not the point. It's possible for sinful men to be genuinely good. Close quote. Alright, get to some more from Enduring Word. 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. In the culture where status and wealth might be measured by the size of one's family, Job was a man of impressive wealth and status. And his possessions were 7,000 sheep. By any measure, Job was a prominent and affluent man. His godliness, wealth, and status made it true that this man was the greatest of all the people of the East. All right. And here's a quote from a guy with the last name Mason. And much later in the book, we will catch a glimpse of what Job actually did with his money and with his time and energy. He rescued the needy. He cared personally for the handicapped and the dying. He brought orphans into his home. He even took the barons of his day to court and argued the case for the unprivileged. So that'll be later on, and here's some verses. Chapters 29, 12 through 17, and then 31, 6 through 21. So that'll be for later. Alright, and his sons would go and feast in their houses, each on his appointed day. And the idea of this description seems to be that Job's family had a happy and close relationship. And this reinforces the idea that Job and his family were greatly blessed, and it does not seem to indicate that they were unduly given over to festivity and pleasure-seeking. And they happily celebrated special days, each on his appointed day, maybe their birthdays, who knows. Alright, well, here's some notes from MacArthur on some of this as well. As typically in the ancient Near East, Job's wealth was not measured in money or land holdings, but in numerous livestock, like that of the patriarchs, like Abraham. And a major claim by any statement that, he was the greatest of all the people of the East. A major claim by any standard, Solomon had a similar reputation. Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the men of the East. 1 Kings 4:30. The East denotes those living east of Palestine, as the people of the northern Arabian desert did. Yeah. All right, and then here's another note from MacArthur here. Yeah, talking about celebrating on the appointed day. Sons would go feast in their houses, each on his appointed day. Now of the week, yeah, of the week, or 7 sons. This reference to the main meal of each day of the week, which moved from house to house, implies the love and the harmony of the family members. And the sisters are especially noted to show these who were cared for with love. Yeah, right. So when he had 7 sons, they would go and feast in their houses, each on his appointed day. And then they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. Yeah. So probably, I guess, every day of the week you would have each brother, having their specific days. Yeah. Anyway. All right. And then at the end of every week, continuing with MacArthur, Job would offer up as many burnt offerings as he had sons. Yep. Yeah, Leviticus 1:4. Officiating as family priest weekly in a time before the Aaronic priesthood was even established. And those offerings were to cover any sin that his children may have committed that week, indicating the depth of his spiritual devotion as a father. And this record is included to demonstrate the righteousness and virtue of Job and his family, which made his suffering all the more amazing. Yep, and these kind of burnt offerings were known as early as Noah. All right, well, here's some more on Job offering burnt offerings from Enduring Word. Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise up early in the morning and offer burnt offerings. Again, the idea seems to be much more that Job was definitely a scrupulously a godly man who served as priest to his family, more than that his children were wicked people who needed constant atonement. And this is a good example for, Christian parents. There's a quote from a guy, Meyer. What a beautiful example is furnished by Job to Christian parents. When your girls are going among strangers and your boys into the great ways of the world, and you are unable to impose your will on them, as in the days of childhood, you can yet pray for them, casting over them a shield of intercession with strong cryings and tears. They are beyond your reach, but by faith you can move the arm of God on their behalf. Maybe interceding for them in prayer. Yep. And continue with Enduring Word. One would not know it was from these first few verses, but the book of Job is about an epic war. Yet no city is attacked or besieged or conquered, no battles are won or lost, no oceans are sailed, or nations founded or adventures recorded. The whole conflict happens on an ash heap, virtually a garbage dump outside of a village. It is an epic war, but one of the inward life, the inner life, a struggle to make sense of some of the deepest questions of life, particularly the issue of suffering. All right. Now moving on to the next section, verses 6 through 12. Satan attacks Job's character. Even though we already have seen his character, that he's definitely an upright man. Yep, and it definitely shows by how he takes care of his family. Yep. The spiritual leader that a man is supposed to be when it comes to the family. All right. Now I'll go ahead and read the verses, and then I'll go through these notes. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, And Satan came among them, and the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" And so Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it." And then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there's none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, and around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand on his person." And so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Alright, so that section is in the MacArthur one. It's Satan attacks Job's character, but in Enduring Word, it's the stage in heaven. You have the stage being set for the rest of the book. Yep, to establish the drama. You started with the earthly stage, now you move on to the heavenly one here. Alright. So, I'll start with MacArthur here. Yeah. Actually, I'll start with this first note from Enduring Word on this section. Now there was a day. This reveals the scene in heaven, unseen to Job and the others on earth, but absolutely real nonetheless. The story of Job can really only be properly understood by taking into account what happens here in heaven, and by having more than an earthly perspective. Alright, here's another quote here by a guy, last name Schmick, I guess. Yeah. Without this prologue, the Job of the dialogues and monologues might justly be considered a man with insufferable self-righteousness, and the reader would be left without a heavenly perspective. Yep. Alright. Let me read the MacArthur note, and then I'll get to some more of the Enduring Word. So Job's life is about to be caught up in heavenly strategies as the scene moves from earth to heaven, where God is holding counsel with his heavenly court. Neither Job nor his friends ever knew about this. And the angelic host came to God's throne to render an account of their ministry throughout earth and heaven. Like Judas among the apostles, Satan was with the angels. Alright. So, here's a note from Enduring Word. When the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, the phrase of God is used in the Old Testament the phrase sons of God, is used in the Old Testament to describe angelic beings, like in Genesis 6. And among this group of angelic beings, Satan also came among them, who was an angelic being. He was just a fallen one. Alright. So, MacArthur actually talks about, Satan. I'll start with him, and then Enduring Word will talk about Satan a little bit too. Emboldened by the success he had with the unfallen Adam in paradise, he was confident that the fear of God in Job, one of a fallen race, would not stand his tests. And he had fallen himself. As opposed to his personal name, Satan as a title means adversary, in either a personal or a judicial sense. Adversary. And this demon is the ultimate spiritual adversary of all time, and has been accusing the righteous throughout the ages. In a courtroom setting, the adversary usually stood to the right of the accused. And this location is reported when Satan in heaven accused the high priest Joshua in Zechariah 3. And that he is unsuccessful is still unsuccessful is the thesis of Romans 8, 31 through 39. Yeah, if God is for us, who can be against us? And nothing can separate us from the love of God. Yeah, not even the accusations of Satan. And the fact, okay, now getting back to enduring word. The fact that Satan came among them shows that Satan himself was an angelic being, yep, and in no way equal to God. We often, to his great delight, inflate Satan's status and importance, thinking of himself as the opposite of God, as if God were light and Satan were darkness, as if God were hot and Satan were cold. Satan wishes he was the opposite of God. Well, he wanted to be God, and that's ultimately why he got kicked out of heaven. Yep. Yeah, Satan wishes he was the opposite of God, and really that he was God. But God wants us to know that Satan is just a mere creature, and he is in no way opposite of God. If Satan had an opposite, it is not God the Father or God the Son. It would probably be a high-ranking angelic being, such as the angel Michael, who would not even dare to rebuke Satan. He says in Jude, "May the Lord rebuke you." And the fact that they came to present themselves before the Lord shows that angelic beings, even fallen angelic beings, have access to the presence of God. But one day they will be restricted to the earth. Yeah. The dragon was cast down to earth in Revelation 12. Alright, but anyway. And then the Lord says this to Satan, "From where do you come?" Lest there be any question about God's role in this ordeal, it was he who initiated the dialogue. It's back to MacArthur. The adversary was not presiding. If anything, Satan raised the penetrating question that might have well have been asked by everyone, perhaps even Job himself. Does Job serve God with pure motives, or is he only in this as long as the blessings flow? Well, that's pretty much what the devil thinks, that he's only serving you because you blessed him so much. Alright, and then of course you get back to this here in enduring word. Where do you come? God allowed and continues to allow Satan and the fallen angelic beings into his presence, but only for his own purposes. Therefore, he demanded to know what Satan's business was. Of course he knew. He was just, I guess, of course he obviously knew the answer to that question. So, but he just asked it. I guess just to get the devil to talk about what he's doing. Yep, and what he thinks, even though, of course, God already knows. Maybe just to get the conversation started. Maybe. Alright. And from going, and then, of course, the devil says he's going to and fro back to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it. So continuing with enduring word. From going to and fro on the earth, though Satan had access to heaven, he also had free access to earth, and he roams about on the earth as a roaring lion seeking someone to devour. 1 Peter 5:8. So it can be said that Satan has an active interest in what happens on the earth. Alright. So he's just roaming to and fro on the earth, looking for someone to get. And then the Lord says in verse 8, actually, here's a quick note on the to and fro from the earth, real quick. Kind of a similar note as what I just read, but I'll go ahead and read it with MacArthur. So this is a picture of haste, going to and fro. No angel, fallen or holy, is an omnipresent creature, but they move rapidly. In Satan's case, as the prince of this world, and as the ruler of demons, the earth is his domain, where he prowls like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. God gave him Job to test. All right. Yeah, and he's going to say now, here's the endearing word, have you considered my servant Job? God. So it was God who brought up Job as the subject of discussion, not the devil. Yep, and God brought up Job in the sense of bragging about Job's godliness and character. Yep, and God was so impressed with Job that he affirmed the description of Job in verse 1, which says he was blameless and upright. Yep. And of course, Satan does consider the saints of God, yet what does the devil see whenever he considers the saints? Yeah, here's some other points here. He sees them and is amazed at the difference between himself and God's people. He sees us and knows that he is fallen, these earthly creatures stand. And he sees them and is amazed at their happiness because he knows too well the misery of his own soul. But he admires and hates the peace in the soul, in the mind, I guess, of the believer. And he sees them and looks for some fault so that he may find some small comfort to his own black soul and hypocrisy. And he sees them, especially great hearts among the saints, and sees those who block and hinder his foul work. And he sees them and looks for opportunities to do them harm. Yep, and there was none like Job on the earth, a blameless and righteous man, one who fears God and shuns evil. God's pronouncement of Job's character. So after the first 2 chapters of Job, almost everything we know about this man is colored by the perspective of the speaker. So later when Job talks about himself and his situations, we must take into account that it is Job who speaks. When his friends speak, likewise, they speak according to their own knowledge and ignorance and bias. Only in the first 2 chapters do we have a truly objective viewpoint about Job. He was really a righteous, blameless, upright man, no matter what his friends would later say. And we know, and God knew, that Job was not necessarily sinlessly perfect, but yet God called him blameless. So another quote by this Mason guy. So there's going to be a lot of these quotes by some of these same people that are referred to in an endearing word. So even going to be some from Spurgeon, so that'll be good. I don't know if there's any in this chapter. It means that no matter how terrible his offenses may have been, all the charges against him have been dropped. Absolutely no blame attaches to him because the very one he offended has exonerated him. And we know that Job was not sinlessly perfect, but yet God unashamedly seemed to see him that way, that he actually is perfect. But not really, but he sees him that way. And the modern believer stands in the same place, completely justified in Christ. Yeah, it's the righteousness of Christ that causes the Father to look at you and see you as sinless and perfect, even though you're not. All right. And now you get to the accusation in verse 9. Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and all he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands and his possessions, and have increased the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. All right, so here's what MacArthur has to say about that. Satan asserted that true believers are only faithful as long as they prosper. Take away their prosperity, he claims, and they will reject God. He wanted to prove that salvation is not permanent, that saving faith can be broken, and those who were God's could become his. And this is the first of the 2 great themes of this book. And Satan repeated this affront with Jesus and Peter and Paul. In the Old Testament, has many promises from God in which he plans to sustain the faith of his children. Oh yeah. All right. Does Job fear God for nothing? Yeah, so endearing word. Here Satan fulfilled the role described in Revelation 12:10, the accuser of the brethren. Satan accused Job before God, insisting that Job's godliness was just essentially false, and that Job only served God for what he could get from him. Yep, and he can use that same accusation against us, but we should not believe it. Yeah, if you're in Christ, then those accusations are not true. And Satan's reply to God reveals his first essential cynicism. He doubts every supposed good as being dishonest and hollow. Cynicism is the essence of the satanic. And Satan believes nothing to be genuinely good, neither Job and his disinterested piety, nor God and his disinterested generosity. Quote from this Anderson guy. And the accusation against Job was also an accusation against God, for it implied that God had bribed Job into obedience. I myself, he seems to say, could be as pious as Job, were I as prosperous as he, coming from a guy called Bradley. And Satan's accusation gave testimony to the fact that God had protected Job. Yeah, have you not made a hedge around him? Now, I've actually heard that hedge around him get misinterpreted, that we need to pray a hedge of protection or hedge of thorns around us in order to protect us from the devil. Yeah, but that's not what it's talking about, so. All right. And have also blessed him. You have blessed. And Jesus indicated that Satan wanted to do much worse against Peter than God allowed him to do. Yeah. Or he wanted to take Peter. Yeah, but Jesus prayed for Peter. Yep. And then, yep. Yeah, but Jesus, yep, but he wanted to do worse with Peter than God allowed him to do because of a similar hedge of protection. And confident in his accusation against Job, Satan insisted that to God that Job would surely curse curse you to your face if this protection and blessing was withdrawn. Satan believed that adversity could make Job move from standing in his faith, that Job would be unable to stand against the wiles and the deceptions of the devil, as is given to the believer in Ephesians 6:13. Put on the full armor of God so you can withstand the schemes of the devil. All right. So the devil thinks that if you just take away Job's blessings, that he's just going to curse God, that he's only being faithful because you blessed him. Take that away, he's going to turn against you. All right. Behold, and then God says, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. All right, back to MacArthur. God allowed Satan to test Job's faith by attacking all that he has. With God's sovereign permission, Satan was allowed to move in on Job, except that he could not attack Job physically. Yeah, he could not kill him. All right. So behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand on his person. So in response to Satan's accusation, God gave him great, though limited, permission to attack Job. God would let the hedge down without completely removing it. So God would still allow the devil to move in on Job, but he was limited. Yeah, so we even learn from this that God has the power over the devil. Yeah, the devil can only do what God allows. Satan had the power and the desire to afflict Job all along. What he lacked was the allowance from God. Yep. He can only do what the Lord would allow him to do. Yet, when God allowed it, Satan was more than happy to attack Job to the limit of the allowance. This is going back to endearing word. Though Satan was not able to attack Job in a much greater way than before, his power was not unlimited. God only allowed Satan to do what he wanted to do to ultimately serve God's purpose. And God allows Satan to do whatever he wants for his own purposes. So even though the devil causes problems, and obviously, God allows the devil to have free reign for his particular purposes. And Satan went out from the presence of the Lord, and then he continued in a sequence of events in the spiritual realm that, as in Ephesians 6:12, were real but not immediately apparent to Job as having their origin in spiritual battle. Alright, let me continue with endearing word here. The revelation of the heavenly scene behind the earthly scene, it helps us to understand the later comment of James on Job in James 5:11. Alright, and here's that James 5:11. Indeed, we count them blessed who endure. You have heard of the perseverance of Job and seen the end intended by the Lord, that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful. So these are the two great themes of the book of Job as explained by James. The perseverance of Job and the end intended by the Lord. It's important that we learn both themes. The end intended by the Lord connects with God's eternal purpose as revealed in Ephesians 3:10 through 11. That God intends that now the manifold wisdom of God might have been known by the church to the principalities and the powers in the heavenly places according to the eternal purpose. And God used Job to teach angelic beings, especially to teach them about his own spectacular wisdom. And therefore the book of Job teaches us that there's an aspect of every human misery that's not a penalty for sin, not correction and righteousness, not redemptive in itself, and not the noble bearing of persecution for righteousness' sake. Job's suffering was of this aspect. We might say that the reason for his suffering was a tool to teach angelic beings. Job had made known the powerful wisdom of God to the principalities and the powers in the heavenly places. Ephesians 3:10 and 11. Let me take a look at that real quick. Ephesians 3, just a second, still looking. Yep, that's exactly what it says. Yep. The manifold wisdom of God might be known by the church to the principalities and powers in the heavenly places. All right. And we might say that all the other reasons for suffering can also be used of God to reveal his wisdom to angelic beings. The man who suffers as the penalty of sin can, by the way he receives suffering, be an important lesson of God's wisdom. But Job's case was unique. His suffering seems to be mainly or only concerned with the purpose of instructing angelic beings. Probably really instructing the fallen angelic being Satan, that even though God may allow the devil to, attack and maybe persecute believers, he's never going to have them. He's never going to get true believers to turn away from God no matter how hard he tries. God will help his people persevere. Alright. In that process, God used Satan himself, even as he went out from the presence of the Lord in all his evil design. Alright, here's another quote here by Bullinger. I don't know who that is. Satan may intend one thing, but God uses him for another. And all things he can minister usually for the ultimate blessing. Usually for the ultimate blessing, comfort, and the help of the people of God, and for their present spiritual profit. He was allowed to be the author of Job's trials and losses, but all of his labor was wasted, for it ended in Job's receiving a double blessing for time and for earth and the righteousness of God forever and ever. So God may allow, evil, usually always for the ultimate good of his people. Kind of like what Joseph told his brothers, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. Yep, and what the devil means for evil may be against God's people, God will mean that for good. Now the Lord may allow those things to happen, but he always has his purposes and bringing a good out of it for his people. God always means suffering for the good of his beloved people. Alright. Another quote. Others have held it as immoral by any human standards that there should be a game between the Almighty and Satan, using as their pawn the soul of Job. Such a view overlooks the possibility we have already mentioned, that God does not meaninglessly allow Job to be tormented. And on the contrary, he's honoring Job by putting his full confidence in the genuineness of Job's faith, which Satan questioned. Also by that Schmick guy. Alright, awesome. Here's a quote from Spurgeon. As good as Job was at the beginning of the book, he will be a better man at the end of it. He was better in character, more humble, and more blessed than ever before. Foolish devil, he is piling up a pedestal on which God will set his servant Job, that he may be looked upon with wonder by all ages. Oh, how many saints have been comforted in their distress by this history of patience. How many have been saved out of the jaw of the lion, and from the paw of the bear by the dark experiences of the patriarch of Uz. O arch fiend, how art thou taken in thy own net? Thou hast thrown down a stone which has fallen on thine own head. Thou madest a pit for Job, and hast fallen into it thyself. Thou art taken in thine art and thine own crafting. Basically, the devil ultimately ends up destroying himself. He may try to do some of his schemes, but they're always going to turn in. They're always going to come crashing in on him. Alright, final section. Job's catastrophic loss and his reaction to it. Job's tragic and sudden losses. Alright. Or in the MacArthur Study Bible, Job loses his property and his children. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. On one of those days of the week. And a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them when Sabaeans, raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was speaking, another came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans from the 3 bands raided the camels and took them away, yes, killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, another came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, And suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the four corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. And then Job arose and tore his robe, and he shaved his head, and he fell to the ground and worshipped. And he said, Naked I have come from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And all of this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Wow. So, here's what MacArthur says. So with four rapid disasters, Satan destroyed or removed Job's livestock, servants, and children. Only the four messengers survived. Wow. Yep, so now there was a day given greater allowance to afflict Job. Satan, back to endearing word, yes, Satan maximized his work against the man of God by bringing the catastrophe to Job in the span of just a few hours. In that limited time, Job lost even his oxen, his servants, his sheep, his camels, and his sons and daughters. So this shows us that Satan was focused on maximizing his advantage. If he were allowed to attack Job, he would do it in the most effective way possible, all the way up to which God would allow him. Therefore, any foothold we give to Satan is dangerous. We should expect that he will maximize any advantage given to him. All right. Quote from a guy, Morgan. Yeah, when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking, it shows us the great cruelty of Satan. Satan here is revealed in a startling light. His malice is seen in the choice of time. He strikes in the midst of festivity. And the catastrophe came upon Job's sons and daughters as they were feasting in their older brother's house. And we know from the beginning that Job, from verses 4 and 5, that Job would specifically sacrifice for his sons and daughters on these days, and yet these prayers and action of Job on behalf of his children, they did not prevent this catastrophe. And this made the crisis all the more mysterious and problematic for Job. All right, and then you got groups of people that are mentioned. You got the Sabaeans and the Chaldeans. All right. And a great fire of God falling from heaven and a great wind. And these tragedies came to Job from many different causes, yet we know the prior cause was at the instigation of Satan. All right. Now, who were these people, the Sabaeans, who took the donkeys and the oxen? According to MacArthur, this is literally Sheba, part of Arabia. These people were terrorizing robbers. They descended from Ham and Shem, two sons of Noah. And then the fire from heaven, it probably is talking about severe lightning falling down and burning up the sheep and the servants. Yep, and then one got out of there alive and went to tell Job in these various situations. And then, of course, the Chaldeans, they were a semi-nomadic people of the Arabian desert, experienced in marauding and war. They raided the camels and they took them away and killed servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. So some of the horrible things that happened here. So that's what MacArthur has to say. Oh yeah, and then also a great wind, will come upon the house where they were feasting and will knock that down and kill the kids. Kill the children of Job. So in all of these tragedies, Yeah, we learned something about how Satan works. Back to Enduring Word. He did not force godly Sabaeans and Chaldeans to do things against Job that he did not want to. He accomplished his evil purpose through the evil character of fallen men. And we also learn that in some way Satan had some influence over the weather, a great wind, and could imitate the phenomenon usually associated with God, the fire from heaven. So probably God allowed him to, have the power to do those things. Yeah, because he could only do what God allowed him to do. So, and the servants of Job thought that God set this fire, but that was only true in a very indirect sense, in the sense that God allowed it by removing a prior restriction. Yeah, God allowed that to happen. Yeah, and this shows that at least at some times Satan wants to work in a way, in such a way that what he does will be blamed on God. Yeah, and we can conclude that Satan swings great power over the weather. Not all power over the weather, but some power over some weather, to the extent that God allows. And the devil has supernatural power at his disposal to direct the elements to accomplish his evil purposes that only God will allow for his purpose, for his ultimate purposes, according to this Lawson guy. And we see that this attack was clearly focused against Job, and yet others suffered because Satan attacked Job and God allowed him to be attacked. Job's animals, servants, and children all perished because Job was the target. This can only be justified if we understand that, and allowing their lives to be ended, God did not allow these people to pass from an immortal state to a mortal state. Each of these unfortunates was born mortal and subject, each one of these unfortunates was born mortal and subject to death. The only surprise in their death was that they died sooner than they expected, not that they died at all. Well, all of us deserve to die because of sin, because of our sin. And the rightness or wrongness of what God either allows or actively does can only be finally judged by the measure of eternity, not by the measure of this life. We can only say that God either did right or wrong by these unfortunates, by the eternal picture. Until then, we trust what Abraham knew of God. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Genesis 18:25. So that great wind that came and knocked the house down and killed the kids, and probably maybe like a tornado type wind, according to MacArthur. All right, so after these tragedies happened, how did Job react to these losses? All right, we'll get there, and then that'll be the end of this chapter. So looks like I'll get through it after all. All right. So after all this happened, Job tore his robe and he shaved his head and he fell to the ground and he worshipped. Wow. All right. And here's some more of Enduring Word. Quite appropriately, Job mourned the tremendous losses. He had lost his sons and daughters and servants of a great amount, and a great amount of material wealth. So it was a time for mourning. Now, Job mourned, but he did not mourn as the heathens or the pagans mourned. He did not cut or gash or tattoo himself for the dead, as it was a common practice among those ancient peoples. Leviticus 19:28. Yep, he ends up falling to the ground and he worships. So in the midst of his mourning, Job also decided to worship God despite his circumstances and feelings. And we might say that this indeed was pure worship and greatly glorifying to God. Oh, yes. And MacArthur says this: he heard the other messages calmly, but on hearing about the death of his children, he ended up expressing all the symbols of grief. but he worshipped God in the expression of verse 21. Yeah, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. And the Lord gives and takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So instead of cursing, he blessed the name of Jehovah. Job's submissive response, it disproved the adversary's accusation. Oh yeah. I mean, I don't think the devil didn't expect Job to say this. I mean, pretty much probably the opposite. And probably he should have said, probably the devil would have expected Job to say, cursed be the name of the Lord. Yeah, because he took away. Yeah, but that's not what happened. Yeah, well, the devil thought by doing all this that it probably would happen, but no. Yep, it backfired. Alright. And later in the book, a spiritual battle is fought in and all around Job. Endearing word again. He will seem to move very far from these words of worship. Yet it's important to remember that a man's first reaction is often very, very telling, and it reveals what really dominates his heart. Worship was Job's first reaction in this crisis. The Lord gave and the Lord takes away. Yep, Job analyzed his situation in a godly and wise way. And Job understood that. He came into the world with nothing. So everything he had was definitely a blessing from the bounty of God. If he now had less, it was still more than he had when coming into this world. Yeah, it was still more than he came into this world with, and more that he would take with to the world beyond. It's kind of a tongue twister sentence. All right, Spurgeon again. His prior prosperity was not due to luck or mere human ingenuity. It was because of the great and powerful blessing of God upon his life. I am so pleased to think that Job recognized the hand of God everywhere giving. He said, "The Lord gave." He did not say, "I earned it all." He did not say, "These are my hard-earned savings gone." No, the Lord gave and the Lord took away. And God was in control of his life, and no matter what the immediate source of adversity or tragedy was, it had passed through the loving and wise hands of God before it could ever touch him. And God was worthy to be blessed and praised in any and all circumstances of life. His words were of the profoundest philosophy. He recognized that man is more than the things that he gathers about him. That's from this Morgan guy. And we can meditate on the implications of the words the Lord gave. We shall never think the good things of this world come to us from earth. They come to us from heaven. They come to us as gifts. That is, they are undeserved. And God gives his gifts with kindness and thoughtfulness. Knowing this sweetens the value of everything that we have. Things more precious because they are gifts from a loving God. And this prevents us from dishonesty. We want nothing in our hand except what God gives, and do not want to mix what he gives with what the devil gives. And it's foolishness to take pride in having more than what another has. And it's easy to give back to God when we really understand that all we have comes from him. And we must always worship the giver and not the gifts. The giver is greater than the gifts he gives. So blessed be the name of the Lord. And this was an expression of worship mentioned in the previous verse. Job was able to bless the name of God even when he was specifically and severely tempted to curse the name of God. All right. Then the final verse. All of this, Job did not sin with his lips. Yep, he did not sin. Yep. He did not sin or charge God with wrong. Or, here's a better rendering, according to MacArthur. And so far, Job was what God claimed him to be, a true believer with faith that cannot be broken. Yep, especially when blessing God. Yep, better that statement, he did not sin or charge God with any wrong. Better, he did not sin by charging God with wrong. Hasty words against God in the midst of grief are foolish and wicked. Christians are to submit to trials and still worship God, not because they see the reasons for them, but because God wills them and has his own reasons, which believers are to trust. Yep. And, of course, when he did not sin or charge God with wrong, going back to endearing word, and I'll end with endearing word. This demonstrates that Job did not sin or wrongfully blame God for when he said the Lord had taken away. He was right to understand that God was ultimately behind these things, even if the immediate responsibility for an event was not God's. We are impressed with Job's perspective on material things. He truly understood what Jesus said in Luke 12:15. One's life does not consist in the abundance of things he possesses. And there are few in the world today who would endure a loss of such fortune with such godliness and patient endurance. We are impressed with Job's unshaken commitment to God and his enduring love for the Lord. Satan's accusation that if blessings were taken from Job, he would curse God was proved to be a lie. And we might say that God was justifiably proud of his servant Job. Yeah. And of course, God knew that Job would hang on to his faith. So in the first round of spiritual warfare, Satan was singularly unsuccessful in shaking Job from standing in his faith, but Job successfully battled against spiritual attack and fulfilled the exhortation that would come many years later from the Apostle Paul, put on the full armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Ephesians 6:13. Yep, Job made his stand against fear, and he did not give in to panic. He made a stand against make-believe, pretending, and appropriately mourned. He made a stand against pride, and he humbled himself before God. He made a stand against self and decided to worship God. He made a stand against a time-bound mindset and chose to think in terms of eternity. He chose to stand against unbelief, and he did not give in to the vain questionings of God. He stood against despair and saw the hand of God even in catastrophe. And he stood against anger, and he did not blame God. And this wonderful triumph of faith, this is also from Spurgeon, it did not come from Job's acting alone, but only as Job reacted to these disasters, filled with and connected to God. Yeah, the triumph of faith was because of God. We are not told that the Spirit of God filled Job to react this way and say these things, but we know it to be true. Satan was acting, but God was also in heaven. So he said to himself, if Satan should do much, I will do more. If he takes away too much, I will give more. If he tempts the man to curse, I will fill him up full with so much love to me that he shall bless me. I will help him. I will strengthen him. Yea, I will uphold him with the right hand of my righteousness. Spurgeon, and that's what he does for believers. Though we can say that God strengthened Job, there was no evident comfort from God, nor would there be any for a long time. 36 chapters of agonizing soul searching will elapse before God so much as lifts a finger to begin comforting Job in these devastating losses, according to this Mason guy. And then here's the end of the notes for chapter 1 from this Clark guy. In this, Satan was utterly disappointed. He found a man who loved his God more than his earthly possession. He had been so successful in this kind of temptation that he made no doubt that he should succeed again. Yeah, he often had been so successful in this temptation. Yeah. So, usually if you take rich stuff away from a man, they're not going to bless God usually. So, yep, so this totally backfired on the devil. Yep, and the Lord knew it was going to. Yep, you belong to God. He's going to help you persevere no matter what the devil throws at you. Yep, and he may allow the devil to come after you, and he'll just use it to make you more like Christ, I guess. Yep, and that may be one of the reasons why suffering happens, to make us more like Christ and to strengthen the faith and to just trust Him, even though that may not always be the specific reason in our time of suffering, but it could be one of the reasons anyway. So help us, Lord, to have the same reaction as Job did whenever we do suffer. Yeah. And thank you and amen. And be with those who are suffering and give them comfort in the time of suffering. Amen. Amen. And until next time, may God bless you, and the grace of Jesus, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.